Good morning. Happy Wednesday, March 18th. Welcome in. This is actually episode 33 of the real estate brief that I've been doing. So welcome in, settle in, grab your coffee. Today's going to be an interesting conversation. It's going to be a little bit different than I typically will do. Today, I'm going to be diving into the entire conversation about Zillow versus Compass and the data war and all that's kind of going on there. And mainly because yesterday, when I was actually doing the live stream, I got all kinds of notifications, got a few text messages talking about how Zillow, KW, Keller Williams, and Remax and other brokerages have partnered up with a deal with a private listing network inside of Zillow, kind of what they're calling pre-market home listings, that kind of stuff. So it's just an interesting pivot on Zillow's part. I actually understand why Keller Williams, Remax, Home Service of America, United Real Estate, I understand the whole reason why they would do that. They needed a response to what Compass was doing with Redfin. So that all makes sense, right? That's no surprise there. The more interesting part, though, is Zillow's position in regards to the private listings and what they were originally touting as, being the champion of the consumer and, fiduciary responsibilities and fair housing and all this kind of stuff, right? And they also made a big pivot. So today we're going to be talking about Zillow versus Compass and kind of the whole data war, private listings, what that kind of looks like. And we're going to kind of comparing all scenarios, but I'm actually going to be beginning talking over a timeline. I'm going to give you guys a timeline on what led us to where we currently are and what that kind of looks like. Why are we even in this war where we have these private listings off MLS, not syndicated everywhere? What is all this about? And I'm just going to preface this is a lot of this is a ton, and it's a ton of noise in the real estate industry. And sometimes we can get caught up in the noise and get distracted by it. And kind of get derailed from what we're actually doing. So we want to be a little cautious there. We don't want to do that, but we do want to pay attention, and we want to be very, very informed in where this could go and what this could mean, because I've been saying it for now a few live streams where this is kind of the makings of what disruption kind of looks like. Now, when I say disruption, I'm not talking about something like a pinned, the relevancy of real estate agents or anything like that. No. We're not talking about that. But we are talking about kind of what is the MLS's role in real estate? What are Zillow and Compass and all these other brokerages trying to do? Paying attention, because there's major shifting going on. This is what this channel is about, or this live stream is about. It's kind of about breaking news in the housing industry and what's going on in the economy and that kind of stuff. So this is a topic I want to have today. So it's a little bit different than normal. Normally, I go through multiple articles, multiple subjects. We just kind of break that down, talk about that together, and just go through that. Today, it's going to be very one note. But I think it's a very relevant conversation to have. And I'm just going to say this kind of discussion needs to happen. There's been a lot of this kind of breaking into silos where all these different MLSs and, some data here, some data there, Zillow having access to all data. These are conversations that's been needing to happen for a long time that has been just segmented into all these small little association pockets. So we're seeing a big shift there. So today we're going to be talking about that and breaking that all down. So with that being said, let's kind of settle in a little bit, grab your coffee, and let's go ahead and get started in this conversation. So let's begin. Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam, and today we're cutting through the noise. We're going to get to the truth in the news, look at the data, and I'm going to give you some of my observations and where I believe you can find opportunity. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our one and only story for today. So we're going to be focusing in on the Zillow versus Compass and the data war and what that means in regards to all these big national franchises jumping onto the pre-market private listing networks and kind of breaking this all down. We're also going to be discussing kind of some, and I hope you guys are here. I hope you guys can join me in the chat, because what I want to kind of talk through is what should the National Association of Realtors do in response to all of this data war going on? Like, where is the advocacy group for realtors, and what is their response to this? And I'm not going to sit here and say I've got it all figured out at all. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying, I think there's a logical progression here that we probably need to be talking about and discussing, and that comes in regards to a national MLS. Now, how do we get there? I don't know. There's a lot of little nuances inside of that. There's a lot of different associations. We've got to kind of work through that. So there's just a lot to kind of get there. But I think that's the conversation we need to be having, because this siloed of data is kind of why Zillow and all these other portals kind of exist. Is they basically mine our data, put it out into global sites, and then sell that data back to us. And that's just been the typical cycle. And it's not like I hate Zillow or anything like that, or these portals. It's just I'm generating the lead, I'm going out, I'm getting the listings, I'm representing buyers, all that kind of stuff. They then take that data and they just sell it back to me. It's kind of weird, right? It's kind of an odd business model, and we're giving them the data. So it's just an interesting problem we've got here. But with all that being said, before we kind of go into everything, what I want to talk about is just a timeline. I want to go down, and we're going to go back to 2018 and 2019. And it's going to begin with talking about Compass. Compass and entered into the scene and what all they were doing and kind of the idea behind Compass. And I'm not going to go back to the beginning, the founding of Compass. We're not doing that. We're going to stay in our specific lane. We're going to stay in our topic and focus there. And we're going to be talking about Compass and launching its private exclusive network. All right. So if we go back, just join me in this timeline so we can kind of set the stage for this conversation. And then we'll get into some of the articles and stuff about this topic. So 2018, 2019, Compass launches the private exclusive network. Compass uses the private networks as a primary recruiting tool for agents. So that was their angle there, where agents can share internally those properties before the MLS. And what they did is they created an exclusive inventory for Compass agents and its clients. So that's what they did back in 2018 and 2019. So that's where it began. So this was the first initial kind of push against the status quo to some degree. Okay. Now Compass has arguments for that. They would argue that it's the fiduciary responsibility to do what the seller would like to do. And the more options we can provide our sellers, the better. So that was their position. Also, given the ability to test the market a little bit, find out the price, how it sits, what works, what maybe needs to be done to the home, what needs to be remodeled, all those type of things. Think of it as like a beta testing for properties. So that's been their argument since 2018. That's why they launched the private exclusive network. That's been their position. Okay. Now we jump into November of 2019. National Association of Realtors does something. They passed Clear Cooperation Policy, which is the CCP. They mandated that any listing marketed publicly, so an outward expression of that marketing outside of your brokerage, must be on the MLS within 1 business day. This was pretty much a direct opposition to what Compass was trying to do with their model. So in 2019, they issued that CCP, the Clear Cooperation Policy, right? Now we jump into May 2020. The CCP officially takes place. The policy bans any kind of pocket listings unless they are office exclusives. So now in May, that goes into effect. Office exclusive. If I want to go out and list a property, I want to keep it just internally as my own listing, I can do that inside of my own brokerage. In other words, never marketed outside of the firm. The CEO at the time, Robert Refkin, labels this kind of like a forced cooperation, right? They're kind of forcing you to do something against your seller and put it out there within 24 hours, or if you try to market it at all. You can only talk about it internally. Robert Refkin labels that as a forced cooperation by NAR. So there's a little bit of now a fight between Compass and NAR. April of 2026, if we jump forward now into April, we go to 2020. They do that. They then begin to backtrack just a little bit on their timeline, and they begin to make it where you have a little bit of a discrepancies where they're allowed to now go in and you can market yourself outside of that. Different associations can set different kind of rules as far as the CCP goes, and there's a little bit more now leniency. NAR begins to kind of take a back step to that, and they don't begin to fight too much against that. Okay. Then in April of 2025. Zillow launches a listing access standards. Okay, so in 2025, Zillow then says, Zillow declares war on the private networks by announcing that any listing marketed off Zillow for more than 24 hours will be banned from their platform entirely. Now, there's a little bit of discrepancy inside of what all that means, but Zillow basically then now enters into the fray in April of 2025, basically saying Compass or any other association, if you decide to not put your home onto the market within 24 hours, you will be banned from being able to put that property on Zillow. So now Zillow now enters into the arena, and now putting a little bit of pressure now on Compass and anybody else that wants to do this type of private listing networks. So that's Zillow's position. Now, Zillow at the time, their whole entire idea behind there is that they want the data. Data is very important for the history of the property. It's very important that people know what's going on with that property so buyers can be aware and have all the data we need to maybe do comps, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's their position. All right, now we jump into September of 2025. We see what happens. Compass and Anywhere, the largest holding company, which has Century 21, Coldwell Banker, all of those big national brands. Compass goes in and acquires Anywhere. It becomes a merger. Now Compass has the largest real estate agent base in the world, 340,000 agents underneath the one umbrella, which is now a massive scale. All right, so now there's a massive movement of agents now pushing back against that. What ends up happening in February 2026, or actually we go back to January of 2026. Go back farther. December of 2025, Zillow and Compass enter a suit, and they have a little bit of a federal battle going on. And basically, Compass is pushing back against Zillow's ban about not allowing them to put their properties onto their market if they don't do it immediately within 24 hours. So Compass sues Zillow. The federal judge denies Compass's request to stop Zillow's ban, stating basically that Compass failed to prove a monopoly by Zillow, and then Zillow begins blocking pocket listings that bypass their platform. So that's the essence. Now we got this kind of battle going on, a little bit of contention going. You got NAR kind of now silent at this point. They're just kind of like, look, every association can decide what they want to do there and how that all looks. You've got Zillow and Compass going at it. Zillow has the position like, look, if you take your property, you don't put it on our platform, you can no longer put it on our platform. Compass then sues them about that. And then, they settle and the judge throws that out and says, well, you can't really sue them against that because Zillow doesn't hold a monopoly on the entire real estate market. Therefore, your lawsuit is not warranted, right? So they dismiss it. February 26th of 2026, the Redfin Rocket merger or agreement kind of takes place, right? So it's a little bit of a plot twist, if you will, inside of this issue, in this battle. So what happens is Compass and Redfin, which is now owned by Rocket Rocket Mortgage and all those other Rocket companies, now Redfin and all them are together. Compass and Redfin basically strike a 3-year deal. Compass's coming soons, their private exclusive listings will now appear on Redfin. And there's all kinds of details inside of that. We'll talk about that later. But basically, Compass has now taken their private listing network, and they've now got a large real estate portal to go along with them for 3 years. And there's all kinds of nuances inside of there, but now you got the Redfin and Compass deal. Zillow begins to putting out all kinds of statements about everything against that, right? They start speaking out against private listings and, all the coming soons and all this kind of private listing marketing. They start talking about it pretty boldly, right? They start talking about how it's going to go against fair housing. They start attacking the entire idea about it, how you're actually segmenting the data and not giving us access to that, which then hurts properties. They go out against them just relentlessly about how Compass is doing this and how it's not good. All right, now we jump into the news that ran yesterday. And that was where Zillow basically flips everything. And now they've got what they're calling the preview to pre-market listings. And they've got their own set to basically do exactly what Compass and Redfin are doing. So seeing what they were doing, they were watching that Compass and Redfin Alliance was going to open up Compass and the 340,000 agents inside of the Compass into a real estate portal, directly defying Zillow's ban and their attack against them. And Zillow realized quickly, we might be losing this war just a little bit. So where they had the position that they were sticking up for the consumer, they were sticking up for data, they were sticking up for fair housing, all the while they were making these accusations against Compass and talking about this. For months, they have been working on their own version of what Compass was doing with other franchise companies. Now, we can't fault other franchise companies for doing this because, look, Compass is large. They need to have a response. I get it. That's good marketing. That's good business, right? You got to make decisions like that. But the interesting part is Zillow. So we have to ask the question, is Zillow ultimately looking out for? That's the thing. Like we have this whole pushback against Compass because they didn't have an answer to it yet. They go out acting altruistic about the market and looking out for consumers and agents and everybody else, having the opposing view of Compass. And in the end, yesterday, just flipping script altogether, basically doing the exact same thing that Compass has been doing. So this is the interesting where we find ourselves. It's very fascinating. Now, we can watch all this and be like, what in the world's really going on here? But really what it comes down to is Zillow makes their money off of having access to data. And if they were to lose Compass and all those listings, they got to have a way to answer to these other franchises that are maybe following suit. We have like Howard Hanna and other places doing their own private listing networks as well. So we have these segmentations going on inside of the industry where there's now room for these, pre-listing, off-market, type properties for a little bit of time, depending on the local association rules and regulations, that has allowed this to kind of happen. So every brokerage and every franchise and everybody out there is trying to figure out a way to do this very same thing. Because again, Compass's entire position is we owe fiduciary responsibility to the seller. We don't owe it to the MLS. We don't owe it to the portals out there, with Zillow and everything pushing back against Compass and banning them from ever marking their properties on there. All those type of things. Compass's entire position since all the way back in 2018 was simply, we owe fiduciary responsibility to the seller. And we have to give them as many options as possible. And if this is an option for them to be able to be private in their listings, test the market out to better price it correctly, then this is what's best for the seller. And it's something in our tool belt as agents that we can offer them. So that brings us to where we're kind of at today. We're sitting in this weird position where some data mining and data fighting is kind of going on. And where does it land? And then really, we need to be thinking about this. And if you're part of the National Association of Realtors, we need to be having really deep discussions in regards to how we respond. We have a very large trade organization, a very large trade association. And if we can come together and talk about this and break down some of our own silos inside of the National Association of Realtors in regards to MLSs, we could actually have a very good opportunity here to leverage the data for real estate agents and ultimately protect the fiduciary responsibility of our clients. And it's a very interesting time. Now, how do we get there and what all does it look like? Well, we can speculate all day long. I think there's some ideas though that we can float around and we can talk about. And hopefully somebody that is interested will be listening to myself and even others. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos and influencers and coaches yesterday, and they all kind of have a different take on this, but a lot of them are kind of saying the same thing. It's like when you have this kind of disruption and you have this kind of discussion going on, it opens the doors up for some interesting things to take place. And the National Association of Realtors needs to be having those same kind of conversations. Like, how do we get our properties in front of as many agents and have the agents have access to all of that data, not just the portals? Like, what's the answer here? So let's stop there and let's now go through just a few articles in regards to what is actually happening and get a little bit more details on this. And we'll go through these articles pretty quickly. I'm not going to labor on them too much, but I've got a few articles, and we're going to first go into Zillow itself and their press release and kind of what they're talking about. We're going to then go in and just kind of read briefly what CNN said in regards to the Compass lawsuit where Compass sued Zillow and what that looked like. And then we're going to talk about NAR and how NAR basically reaffirmed MLS discretion following Compass Redfin announcement. And then we're going to get an opinion piece by Home Services CEO, Chris Kelly. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll end with NAR introduces new flexibility for sellers while retaining clear cooperation policy. So we're going to try to get a big overall view. I've kind of given you a little bit of a timeline. We got that idea down. It was a little rough. I mean, this is live. I mean, I didn't take my time to kind of hedge this all out. But you get the idea. You know how we started and how we got here. So now let's just kind of talk about what all the different companies are saying, what their positions are, and let's work through this. So let's begin with Zillow's own press release. So this is Zillow Group. This is by investors.zillowgroup.com. And this is something to note when you start talking about public traded companies. We have to understand that they're playing to the benefit of the investors. And that's what we got with Zillow. We got with that with Compass. We got that with KW, Remax. I don't, KW is that public? I think they're public traded. But anyway, you've got this public traded companies that are playing. They're more important person in their entire everything that they do is the investors, the stock market, who they answer to, right? So that's where they play to. So we got to understand first and foremost that that's the game that's ultimately being played. And sometimes as agents, we're pawns, right? All right. It says Zillow launches Zillow Preview to bring pre-market home listings into the open. Seattle, March 17th, 2026. And see, notice how it starts off with NASDAQ. So there you go. It's a publicly traded company. Announced Zillow Preview, a new product that brings pre-market home listings into the open by making them publicly visible on Zillow and Trulia. At a time when some real estate brokerages are harming consumers by hiding listings in private networks, there's a direct dig at Compass, Zillow Preview allows brokerages to broadly share listings before they hit the active market so consumers can access them. It launches next month with initial partners that each align with Zillow's pro-transparency, pro-consumer principles, including large-scale brokerages and franchisors, Keller Williams, Remax, Home Services of America, Side, and United Real Estate. These pre-market listings will be exclusively available on Zillow, Trulia, and their own listing brokerage and agent sites. Let's just pause for just a second. This is literally the exact same thing that Compass just did with Redfin. Zillow could have done this at the very beginning in regards to what Compass was talking about, but they went to war with them. And so Compass goes out and makes a partnership with Redfin. Notice how even in Zillow's own statement, they're talking about, how they've come up with this. And even though it says, where was it? At a time when some real estate brokerages are harming consumers by hiding listings in private networks. See, the direct attack against Compass in a way. This has not been Compass's entire aim. The Compass entire aim has not been to have these private areas. That's not the argument to be had here. That's why Compass even negotiated a deal with Redfin. They understand that they want to be able to test the market for the seller, to get the price right, to give time to make repairs and stuff like that before going out everywhere. In other words, the best opportunity to position the property to maximize the income for the profit for the seller. That's the position. So, and Compass has been actively trying to figure that out. So Zillow's now taken this position where they're trying again to make themselves look like this great guy. But just don't forget that just a week ago, they were outspoken against this whole thing. Like, don't forget that. In a growing number of markets, the public cannot see pre-market homes, including listings often referred to as coming soon. Zillow Preview brings these homes out of the shadows and into the daylight, making them publicly visible instead of confined to closed systems, while working within MLS frameworks and supporting brokers and agents in complying with local rules. Again, no different. Zillow continues to transform the way people buy, sell, rent, and finance homes. With Zillow Preview, agents at participating brokerages can make listings publicly visible on Zillow and Trulia during the preview period, giving consumers access to listings that weren't being widely distributed before. During that time, buyers can discover these listings in search results, save and share them, and connect with the listing agent or pre-schedule tours with a Zillow partner agent, which Zillow partner agent means you sell it back to them. That's great. For 20 years, Zillow has been guided by a simple idea. Real estate works best when information is open and accessible. In other words, they had to make a change because Compass is putting pressure on them, but they had to maintain this same exact idea. Zillow Chief Executive Officer Jeremy Waxman: no one should have to obligate themselves to an agent from a specific brokerage just to know the full breadth of inventory available. Zillow Preview shines a light on listings that might otherwise stay hidden, giving buyers open access to their options and sellers the broad exposure they deserve. So anyway, this is the breakdown. This is what Zillow's talking about. It talks about participating brokerages say Zillow Preview gives their agents a new way to serve clients. This is the exact same thing as Compass and Redfin. Exact same thing. As an independent company, we support efforts that make the real estate marketplace more transparent, said Gary Keller, executive chairman and co-founder of Keller Williams. Ensuring that consumers, our franchisees, and agents have meaningful choice will always guide our approach. Remax has long believed that transparency and the broadest distribution of listings gives buyers and sellers the best outcome. In other words, I get the other brokerage position. I mean, shoot, you got this large Compass 340,000 agents, you better do something, right? I mean, they're going to gain eyes that you're not going to get. So they've got to pivot. They got to figure out their thing. The part that I just find baffling to me is Zillow was so much against it and having such verbiage against it that in one day they just flipped the script automatically and changed their entire position on all of it. Zillow Preview creates a new way for sellers and listing agents to reach Zillow's broad audience of buyers with upcoming listings. Participating agents receive 3 key benefits: greater visibility, free connections based on buyer choice. It says consumers have the choice to connect with listing agent or with local buyers. Revenue participation. If a qualified Zillow Preview connection results in a closed transaction through Zillow's preferred agent network, the listing agent may receive a share of the revenue Zillow earns from the transaction, paid through their brokerage. This fee is paid by Zillow and does not increase consumers or agents' cost. As always, commissions remain negotiable between consumers and agents and representing them. We'll see how that pans out. I'm not sure what all the detail is there, but it's fascinating. Anyway, there is Zillow's official statement on this. The links to these articles are in the YouTube description of my channel. You can go back and read this press release that they just issued out. And what I challenge you to do is you can go back, just do a Google search and type in Zillow's stance on Compass and Redfin. And you'll read all kinds of articles about what they were saying just 48 hours ago. Yesterday, an article comes out that they're doing the exact same thing. So their entire position was how Compass was doing things. It was anti-competitive, wasn't fair, could even be violation of fair housing, basically saying all these things, all the while working on the same exact thing in the background. I mean, again, it's a game. It's a complete game, guys. It's a complete game. All right, let's jump into the CNN article. We're going to go back in time just a little bit because we want to discuss this. I want this to be just on this one stream, this 1 hour, and we're going to talk about this. This next one is by CNN Business. It says, Compass sues Zillow as fight over privately marketed listings heats up. So Compass gets upset, like basically where Zillow then said, if you go this private route, if your property is not marketed within 24 hours on our site, it is banned. It is banned from Zillow. In other words, no matter how long you have that listing, you can no longer put that listing on our website. That was their statement. That was their position. So again, you have to ask yourself, if they're saying that they're there for the seller, then why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would they take that position so strongly? All right. And this is now, remember, this is going back in time just a little bit. We're going back into, this is June 23rd of 2025. It says Compass has officially brought a long simmering real estate dispute into the courtroom. On Monday, the real estate brokerage sued home search website Zillow, accusing it of engaging in an anti-competitive conspiracy to maintain its dominance over digital home listings. Compass lawsuit marks a new phase in the battle between real estate's largest brokerages and home search engines over control of home listings. If Compass's lawsuit succeeds, it could transform how and where real estate listings are shared online. Zillow says it's working in the interest of consumer transparency and that Compass is trying to hoard listings. Compass says that Zillow adds costs to the home buying process. In the internet age, most home shoppers turn to home search engines to begin their search, and Zillow is the powerhouse player in that space. 80% of home searches go directly to Zillow's website when looking for a new home, according to a February investor presentation from the company. Pause there for just a second. 80% of home searches go directly to Zillow's first. Why? They have all the data. They have every bit of the data across the entire nation. They've got it all. You have an MLS, you have your own association MLS, and you are siloed into that MLS, and we syndicate out to Zillow and other sister sites, right? So all consumers are generating their search on that platform. So you can see why they would do something like this, right? You understand the argument here. It's not hard to reach. This is not some kind of crazy conspiracy theory. It's about money. It's about control. It's about having the data. The source of Compass's complaint, which was filed on Monday in a New York federal court, is a new rule from Zillow stating that any home listing publicly marketed to consumers anywhere must be published on Zillow within 1 day, or it won't be allowed to be published on Zillow at all. Compass referred to the rule as the Zillow ban in its lawsuit. Compass claimed the rule, which took effect on May 28th and will be enforced starting June 30th, is designed to crush competition in the home search space. It goes on to say, quote, "The Zillow ban is designed to make it hard, indeed nearly impossible, for home sellers to sell their home outside of Zillow. In an effort to force all listings to be on Zillow, where Zillow makes money selling leads off the homeowner's listings," the lawsuit said. Zillow has disputed Compass' characterization, stating that the lawsuit is unfounded and the new rule was enacted in the spirit of fairness. Zillow has said its new policy is in response to sales tactics that have gained popularity over the past year, which limit the visibility of home listings. It says, quote, "At the heart of this issue is a simple principle. When a listing is publicly marketed, it should be accessible to all buyers across all platforms, including Zillow," a Zillow spokesperson said in a statement. "Hiding listings creates a fragmented market, limits consumer choice, and creates barriers to home ownership, which is bad for buyers, sellers, and the industry at large, especially in this inventory and affordability constrained environment." Compass marketing strategy. We talk about this, they have a three-phase process. We're going to keep going down. Zillow competitor Redfin also named it in suit. The Zillow ban piggybacks on a 2019 policy called Clear Cooperation that was established by the National Association of Realtors, the trade association that often sets the rules for real estate professionals. That policy says that if a real estate agent publicly markets a property, such as by putting it on a website, sending it in an email, or posting it on social media, you kind of get what this is. It says Compass also accused Zillow of conspiring with other players in the real estate industry, its home search competitor Redfin and brokerage eXp Realty, to maintain its market dominance. Both Redfin and eXp Realty agreed to adopt and adhere to Zillow's new rule after it was announced. While Compass accused Redfin and eXp Realty of being co-conspirators, they were not named as defendants in the suit. In a statement, eXp Realty said, "Any implication of co-conspiracy is categorically false, and that its business strategies are developed independently." And it says, quote, "It's ironic that Compass, a company that's never turned a profit, is choosing to burn cash and credibility on a lawsuit and suing Zillow for giving consumers access. That's not strategy, that's desperation." So it's interesting, guys, okay? There's a lot to note in this, okay? So if you really look at this, this actually tells you something, that Compass is willing to take the loss to fight for the rights of the seller and data into the agent's hands. It actually makes the argument that Compass is actually willing to hurt themselves to fight for the data. Now, you also notice that you can see Compass and what they're actually doing here and how smart of a business players they are, is because at first, Compass and Redfin were at odds. Compass even called out Redfin. So you know Robert Refkin, CEO of Compass, has had many conversations with Redfin to lead into the partnership that they now currently have. So he's met with them, he's talked with them, he's discussed this entire policy with them that led to a 3-year commitment that Compass private listings will show up on Redfin. Zillow adamantly opposed that, and now they're doing the same thing. So we have to kind of step back and look at all this, right? We have to think through this. And again, I keep saying this, I'm not knocking the other brokerages or the other franchises. I get why they did it. I mean, it's a smart move for KW, Remax, and everybody else to figure out a way to get their properties onto portals and be able to test what is going to happen without adding all of the data, the history, the days on the market, and everything to a property where it could stigmatize the property. And I don't think Compass ever was intending to be this private listing network. They were trying to figure out a way to best position sellers and make sure that the agent also has the control of the data. That's the position. So we're coming to some kind of neutral area here, where maybe even Zillow's kind of caving a little bit. Obviously, they flipped, right? So there's a little bit of an argument to be had there. So I think this is a very interesting conversation. Let's go on to the very next one. Because now the next one here, we're going to be talking about NAR. This is just this month, March 9th, 2026. And it says NAR reaffirms MLS discretion following Compass Redfin announcement. So this is NAR's kind of response to the whole Redfin thing, because people are pushing them for an answer. So here's what NAR had to say as far as Compass and Redfin goes. It says the association emphasizes that brokers and agents who choose to participate in an MLS agree to comply with the policies and rules. And that's simply put across the board. I think that's correct. I think that's the right position, is if you're a part of the association of realtors and you syndicate or you put listings on the MLS, you agree to comply with the policies and rules. We'll just set this stage here. Zillow, Compass, all of the franchises are not in a disagreement with that statement right there. They would all 100% agree. And I think that's good. I think that's where NAR is in a good position to add a foundation and a stability to kind of all the noise, because we are still, if we're going to be part of the Association of Realtors, we have policies and rules that protect a lot of this kind of noise that's going on. So we can rest there as realtors and say, okay, this all might be happening, but we're talking about just a few days, and we're arguing about these private listings, which is a very small percentage of the amount of listings that we have. All right, so it is a lot of noise. We do have an association that has still got the rules and policies, which this validates why we still need those things. All right, so it says the National Association of Realtors reaffirmed that multiple listing services, MLS, have discretion to set their own rules and policies regarding listing statuses following the late February announcement that Compass will market its coming soon status and private listings on Redfin. It says, quote, NAR respects the rights of individual brokers to make their own business decisions and does not comment on specific brokerage practices or business models, a spokesperson said. Quote, NAR does not have a national policy regarding coming soon statuses. Listing statuses are matters of local discretion, with each MLS determining the appropriate statuses for its marketplace. Brokers and agents who choose to participate in an MLS agree to comply with that MLS's policies and rules, which are designed to benefit consumers and their marketplace. So we're having all this kind of noise going on. We're talking about a very small percentage of listings and a very small percentage of the market. Very relevant conversation. NAR is holding that line saying, look, this is where we stand. Okay, this is the neutral area. This is where we stand. It's a good position to be in. So I applaud the National Association of Realtors for having this kind of statement. I think this is the correct position for them to take. Compass International Holdings, global network of real estate professionals. We talked about that. NAR's statement echoes its longstanding position that sharing properties on the MLS provides it for transparency in the marketplace. Quote, NAR values the pro-competitive and pro-consumer benefits of MLS, including broad market exposure, access to available properties for sale in a marketplace, and equal access to the public. An NAR spokesperson said, we will continue to protect and advance the rights of Americans to own real estate and to support consumers throughout the home buying and selling process. NAR has evolved MLS rules in recent years following feedback from members and internal risk mitigation efforts. It introduced the multiple listing options for sellers, MLOS, last March to provide sellers working with listing brokers more options and choice in determining the best marketing strategy that meets their needs and interest. NAR also modernized its MLS handbook in November. So we can pause there. This is a good moment to kind of rest just for a second. We have all kinds of noise going on. We talked about the timeline, Zillow, Compass, the whole war, all the other franchises, the private listing networks, all this kind of stuff, control for data, fighting for the data. We have the National Association of Realtors in the middle, kind of bringing it back down to the reality where we are as real estate agents to say, look, we still have rules and stuff that you have to abide by that adds stability to the market. As real estate agents, we can rest there. Okay, that's a great place to rest. We can listen to the noise and we pay attention and we navigate this as we go forward. And we do strategically use all of the tools that are given to us to do the best we can in our fiduciary responsibility to our clients. And that does come directly into the seller. Every option that we have that we can present to the seller that is bettering their position in the marketplace, we should understand and articulate. So if you have a seller that wants privacy, you have options. If you have a seller that has a unique type of property and you have no idea how to price it, there's not enough comps, then you have an option, right? And that's actually what Compass has been fighting for. And look, it sounds like I'm all pro Compass, but look, I think their argument is the best argument. I think it's the one that makes the most sense because we do owe the fiduciary responsibility to the seller, not portals, not the MLS, nobody else. But we have to, we have to abide by the rules in the MLS. We do have to do that. But if we have options, we should use those options to better position our sellers. So, and what that means, whatever that is. So I think the, National Association of Realtors has a good position on this. Now, let's go into just a response piece. This is here is by Emma News. Chris Kelly, Home Services CEO, says Zillow pre-marketing deal should be a pulse check for industry. Okay. Chris Kelly said now is a time to assess long-term implication versus short-term gains. Home Services of America CEO Chris Kelly says Zillow's new program, allowing agents to pre-market listings before they enter the MLS, offers the real estate industry a chance to rethink how homes are distributed online. And this is exactly, this is where I would say 100% agree, is all this kind of discussion. When we have discussion like this and there's Discord and all this kind of stuff going on, there's all this kind of noise, this is an opportunity for us as agents to rethink how homes are distributed online. That's where we need to really hone in. That's where this conversation needs to happen. This is where I encourage you to go to your National Association of Realtors, MLS board and committees and associations and everybody else and start having these kind of conversation. Is like, what do we do as an association in response to all of this? Because look, it is you guys that are going out there assuming all the liability for listings. It's you all that are going out, representing your clients, negotiating deals, taking all the liability of doing so, getting into the trenches. You are the one that is going in, having the conversation with your seller, listing the property depending upon the market, and putting it all into a system that then goes out everywhere. You are the front man. You're the one that data belongs to in regards to helping to navigate the market for your clients. So what is the best solution there? And I'll get into this a little bit, but I'm just going to touch on it now, is like National Association of Realtors. What is the answer here? How do we break down the silos of the MLS data? Why are we not having these conversations about a national MLS? How do we get there? Is there a way for us to create our own local silos, but then also still have a national database? Is there a way for us as agents to be able to have access across state lines? Because the reality is, if we want to get down to how we protect our clients the most in one of the most complicated transactions that they'll do in their life that they might only do once in their entire life, maybe twice at the most, and it's so complex with so much regulation, so many changes, and such a prying into their private lives, it disrupts their entire lives. It has the most emotional drain and stress on a human is to take their home family and move. It disrupts everything. The kids feel it, the parents feel it, the jobs. I mean, it's a high stress environment. They need an advocate on their side that is not handicapped by not having access to data. So how do we break down these silos? And let's just do a scenario here. If I represent somebody in my state and that person I'm representing is being relocated to another state. Right now, I have no way of doing the research to find the best agent for them, to even begin searching for homes for them in the area that they're moving to, because I know the nuances of my client the most. Let's just say it's somebody I've worked with 3 or 4 times in my own area that now are leaving my area to a different state, and they know nobody there. They have no connections there, but they know me, that I can get them in contact with people that are good and are great agents and represent the market that they're looking at, that specialize in the niche that they are, that I understand the nuances of my client. How do I get there? If all I can do is send it to a relocation, just call a company up and say, hey, here, I got this great client for you. Go have at it and send me a check when you get done. How am I doing a service to them if I can't even begin to search with them? If you had a national database where you can go on my website and search for every property out there, instead of going to Zillow where 80% of all those searches begin, they can come to my site and they can search for all properties. They can communicate with me, the agent that knows them, understands their needs and wants, and can look for homes in their market. So then when I begin to refer them off to another agent, I can tell that agent everything about my client. I can inform them that they've already looked at some of these homes. I can better position the agent that's getting the client, the lead, into where they're already looking and expedite that process so it's less stressful for my clients, right? I mean, there's a lot of benefits. So how do we get there, National Association of Realtors? How do we get there? How do we get there? It says home services among the brokerages participating in Zillow Preview, a new program that allows agents to market listings on Zillow before they're entered into the multiple listing service while still complying with local MLS rules. Can't fault them for that. Again, I keep saying that, but I mean, look, it's a good play. Kelly said the rollout comes at a moment when brokerages and portals are increasingly experimenting with different approaches to listing exposure. I hope what it serves as is a little bit of a pulse check. I would agree. Kelly said it to Inman over the phone. Everybody should take a moment and really assess the long-term implications versus maybe the perceived short-term gains. Yes. Yes. Zillow announced Tuesday that Keller Williams affiliates will be able to pre-market listings through Zillow Preview with Home Services of America, RE/MAX, United Real Estate, and SOD, also part of the program's initial rollout. Now, here's the interesting thing. You know how I said like Zillow going up against Compass, saying all this stuff about them, saying this is, you don't have the consumer, you might be going against fair housing, all this kind of stuff. Listen to what it says. Kelly said, Home Services had been discussing participation with Zillow for the past month as the company prepared for the launch. He added that Zillow appeared to have been developing the program for several months before that. Yep. Let that set in. So all the while speaking out against Compass, they've been working on their own thing behind the scenes. They just haven't out yet. And somehow they're there for you guys. They're there for the consumer. The launch comes as brokerages and portals increasingly explore new ways to handle listing exposure. Earlier this month, Compass and Redfin announced a partnership allowing Compass agents to display coming soon listings on Redfin's platform. There's my dog barking. Welcome to live. Other brokerages are also testing their own strategies. Last week, Pittsburgh-based brokerage Howard Hanna launched Hanna List, a private listing network that allows its agents to share properties internally before distributing them more broadly through the MLS. I just mentioned that earlier too. It's, this is what's happening. This is happening kind of across the board. As those moves take shape, some industry observers have begun to frame the debate as competing camps emerging around how listings should be distributed. Kelly said some companies may be thinking about the issue in those terms, but he believes the reality is more nuanced. Here's what Kelly says. He says this, quote, I do believe there are some that are thinking of it along those kinds of linear terms. Like you're either on this side or the other side, Kelly said. But like most things in life or business, the truth is somewhere in between. Yes, this is where you cause conversation, you cause a disruption, you have all these type of things happen, you have the discussion, and you land somewhere in the middle. Kelly said brokerages across the industry are experimenting with new ways to distribute listing content, but warned that the industry could create problems for consumers if listings become scattered across competing platforms. I don't disagree. Again, National Association of Realtors, what is your response? What do you do here? Here's an opportunity, guys. Here's an opportunity. If all brokerages went running in the direction of their own private listing networks, not shared with others, not put on the portal, not shared in the MLS, that's where you really start running into the risk of separating the agent from the consumer. The result, he said, could be fragmented marketplace where buyers must search multiple websites just to see what homes are available. If you look at portals like Zillow, it's a little like YouTube TV, Kelly said. That's where consumers are going to watch the content. It says, I'm going to skip on down. Let's go down to, okay, still, Kelly said the broader industry debate over listing distribution is likely to continue as he sees more opportunity in the way homes are marketed. Quote, the truth is there's lots of ways to do real estate. The question is whether we're thinking about what works best long-term, not just what helps us in the moment. It's a good place to rest. A lot of noise, a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue going on in regards to this. It's a lot of noise in a lot of ways. NAR is giving us a good foundation to build up on because there are still policies and procedures in place. Because when you really look at this and you look at what Zillow and Compass is doing, we're talking about a very small percentage of the market. We are talking about a very percentage of homes. Still relevant, still a factor. It's still a tool in the belt of an agent to be able to represent their seller extremely well. But in the end, a majority of the properties are going to be syndicated everywhere. And my position here would be that the best position for almost every single seller would be to mass market the property everywhere possible. I think that is truly, in most cases, the right answer. But there are these nuances, there are these situations where there is an option that might be better for the seller. And we as agents that owe the fiduciary responsibility to the seller should be able to offer that to our sellers. That means we got to be equipped and understand what that is. And that also means with all this playing out, we got to understand that these public traded companies are playing to the ears of their investors first and foremost, not the consumer, not the real estate agent, not the market, and probably not even fair housing. Yeah, they do factor that in, but that's not their game. Their game is to position themselves in the best way to make money and pad their books to make their investors happy. That's their position. So that's why companies like Zillow will flip-flop to whatever benefits them the most. So understand that these type of plays is not altruistic in regards to you. Their verbiage, their press releases, all this kind of stuff will sound like they are. They will appeal to your better senses and make it sound like they are the orator of truth and care and love, and that what they're doing is just for the best of the whole. And in the end, I think we just made the case that that's not the case, right? I think you can see that it's going to be about positioning what's best for them. And I just put the conversation back into the laps of the National Association of Realtors and say, what do we do in response? Agents that are listening, speak up, have conversations, volunteer on MLS committees and boards, and get involved. We need to start having this conversation. Is there a way for us to better represent our clients? And I think there is. I think there's a way to do this. I don't know the way forward, but I not all the details, but I think breaking down some of the silos, not necessarily taking away the silos where you have different MLSs, but at least at the very minimum, having a national MLS, whereas agents, I can search for homes and agents in every single state across the nation. That's just such an easy ask. Now, I understand there's not an easy way of implementation. I understand that there's a lot of red tape and a lot of things we'd have to think through, policies, procedures, who governs that, who controls that, what does all that look like, all those type of things. But I think we need to have that conversation, and we need to have it rapidly. We need to be talking about this because right now we are handicapped by what the portals want us to do. So, all right. Now, tomorrow when I go live, we're going to be talking about something else. I'm literally not even going to bring this up because I have spent an entire hour talking about this. But it is literally when I opened up my, real estate news, it's all that was being talked about. And I wasn't really I was just going to feature like 1 or 2 articles today about it. But I thought, you know what? It's in the news. We're talking about it. I'm going to throw all my thoughts out there, let them rest, let you guys hear them. Let's veg this out. We talk about this in the comments. We can keep this kind of going. But I think it's a conversation we need to have tomorrow. You can watch me live, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, right here where you're watching me now. I'm not going to be talking about this. I hope. I hope I'm not. But this is what this is. I got to be honest. It's kind of what makes this fun. It is kind of what makes this fun. It's also what I love about this industry is it's just constantly changing. It's just always pivoting and shifting around, and I think it's just great. So anyway, I will say though, we're going to end up and we're going to be just fine. We're going to be just fine. I've been doing this for a long, long time, over 20 years. And every kind of shift, man, let me tell you something. Real estate agents are so resilient. Oh, love it. All right, with all that being said, that's the end of the show, guys. Thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me ramble on about this one specific topic, and I thank you. Hopefully it's been, beneficial for you guys to hear it. Let me know in the comments your thoughts, your worries. If you disagree with me, let me know. I welcome it. I don't mind, disagreements and having those kind of discussions whatsoever. I think we just need to focus in on the facts and talk about that as we go forward. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. That is your real estate brief for today. And if you did find this helpful, please consider hitting the like button to tell YouTube you would like more of this type of content. If you're watching me on TikTok, please follow me, like, and share this out to other people. And consider subscribing to join a community of real estate agents that are focused on building a business that is relationship focused first. Look, there's so much more I could be talking about this, but I'm not gonna do it anymore. I'll see you tomorrow right here where you're watching it, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. See you then. Take care. Enjoy your day.